I love Halo. It's one of my favorite franchises in the world, even if that's not been as easy recently. Even though there's a lot of discourse in the Halo community about the last 15 years or so of the franchise, one thing that just about everyone can agree on is that the franchise's original trilogy is untouchable. Three completely flawless, perfect entries that never need to be altered ever again. Then the towering intellects of 343 Industries, still high on the fact that they just inherited one of the most influential and iconic franchises in gaming history, decided they wanted to leave their own stamp on the original trilogy. They did this by tasking two other studios, Saber Interactive and Certain Affinity, with remastering the very first game released all the way back in 2001. I remember a while ago, me and someone else were talking to a friend of mine that's looking to get into Halo, and the one thing we both said was to play Halo 2 on the remastered graphics, but leave CE on the legacy graphics. This got me thinking, why does everyone play Halo 2's remaster but completely ignore CE's? Probably because Halo 2's new graphics and pre-rendered cutscenes are some of the best in the history of the franchise and managed to keep the heart and soul of Bungie's original art direction and mesh it with photorealistic modern graphics that look way cooler and more vibrant and more dramatic than Infinite's real-time cutscenes in my opinion. Whereas Halo CE Anniversary is a complete abomination of stitched together assets, terrible art and audio design, and a complete lack of understanding of any kind of atmosphere or feeling that the original game's art style was trying to create. The problems with the game's art style literally start on the main menu screen. The 2001 original was minimalistic, mysterious, and heavily stylized, showing nothing but the game's logo and options to play the campaign or multiplayer in possibly the most 2001 font I've ever seen, with the camera slowly orbiting the halo ring that we visit in the campaign. The remasters is incredibly overdesigned, showing the horrible monstrosity of a logo that the remaster for some reason decided to use, and the art style of the backdrop is just simply abhorrent. This just loses all of the simplistic charm that the original main menu had. This genuinely looks like a MySpace profile from like 2008. I know this was the early 2010s and it was considered cool to take recognizable designs that had become iconic and had been established for decades and make them unnecessarily complicated and overly detailed, but this is just horrible. This is a consistent problem throughout the whole game. It doesn't even look like it's a Halo game anymore. It looks like some kind of bad Minecraft texture pack or some poorly made Unreal Engine asset flip that you'd find on Steam for like 90 cents. That's because this game was made so cheaply that most of the game, over 50% of the assets actually, were just ripped straight from newer games like Halo 3 or Halo Reach and sort of plastered over the bones of the original game. This causes all sorts of problems, like the fact that the physics of the old game are still there, meaning that when you have the remastered graphics turned on, you can just walk straight through things like walls, boundaries, and other geometry. Aside from these glaring technical issues, it just makes the whole game look like a visually incoherent mess. Since those games both had completely different art styles and aesthetic directions from the original Halo CE, they just don't mesh well at all with the game. And let's not even get started on what the Covenant look like now. Instead of making their own assets, the Covenant textures from Halo Reach were literally just Control V'd over the Covenant from the original game. This means that they now look horribly misshapen because the newer textures have just been awkwardly squeezed onto a skeleton for something that was originally supposed to look very different. This creates all sorts of bizarre issues like the remastered elites looking like they're standing on tiptoes and jackals looking weirdly hunched over. I'd like to remind you that this game had not one, but two major studios working on it and was backed by one of the biggest and richest companies on the planet, and was the 10-year anniversary of one of the most influential and significant games of the 2000s. Aside from this, even the original assets and lighting models made specifically for the game are just horrible. Like in the second level, where you first step out onto the Halo ring, for some reason, along with continuing the problem of everything being ridiculously overly detailed and completely charmless, everything just has this weird yellowish piss filter over it that completely ruins the sense of wonder and mystery that the original game had. In places where it should be vibrant and exciting, the remaster makes everything appear weirdly dull and brown, like when you first step out onto the Halo ring. And in places where the original felt dark and moody and foreboding, like in 343 Guilty Spark, the remake completely strips away the ominous atmosphere by making everywhere well lit and overly detailed and all drenched in this weird kind of blue light. The thing is, even though the original CE is obviously heavily outdated graphically at this point, it really does go to show that great artistic direction and vision will always be better than massive resources. Even to this day, whenever I play 343 Guilty Spark from CE, the intro cutscene and slowly progressing through the swamp and mopping up small groups of Covenant, and all the dialogue with the gradual build up to the first introduction of the Flood, I still got chills every time. Older games like this had absolutely mastered using the graphical limitations of the era to their advantage to create really dark and atmospheric and moody spaces, even though they could only create environments with very little actual detail. I'm actually considering doing a full video about this at some point in the near future, because to this day, most of the games that I find scariest are games from this era. Just something about the emptiness and the liminal spaces and the gradual build-up of loneliness is just an aspect of game design that I think modern AAA studios have lost. So if that's a video you'd like to see happen, please let me know. Staying on the subject of graphics, CE Anniversary's character animations are actually some of the worst I've ever seen in a AAA game. This is mainly because it was done with very, very early motion capture technology. There are too many examples of moments where the animations look incomplete to go into here, but here's just a few examples to show you how bad this actually gets. I'd like to remind you that this was a AAA game backed by a $3 trillion company. Anyway, the next thing I want to talk about is just how atrocious the audio design of this game is. Literally, in some of the cutscenes, you cannot physically understand anything the characters are saying without subtitles over the sound effects. Yeah, I think that's all that needs to be said there. I'm honestly just completely dumbfounded by some of the creative and technical decisions made in this remaster. It really makes me question if this was even tested properly before it was released, because there's no way anyone thought this was ready to see the light of day. So, in my opinion, Halo CE Anniversary is the laziest, most technically scuffed, and visually disgusting remaster of any game ever, and definitely the worst in a franchise this high profile. If anyone else can think of another one this bad, or God forbid, even worse, I'm genuinely curious. Anyway, things are actually starting to look up for Halo CE. 14 years after the game's remaster was released, something's being teased. At last year's Halo World Cup, a teaser was shown confirming that 343 is rebranding to Halo Studios, and some fairly vague gameplay that shows Chief in his classic Mark V armor was shown. And there have been a fair few rumors that a full scale modern remake of CE is what's next for Halo, which is hopefully getting revealed at the World Cup in a couple of weeks, and will probably be released for the 25th anniversary of Halo CE next year. This will hopefully be a definitive remake of CE that will finally give it the modern graphical fidelity that it deserves and realise the potential of Bungie's original vision while keeping the charm and classic feel. Anyway, that's all I've got to say for today. I'm really enjoying going down the gaming content rabbit hole for the last couple of videos, and I've already got a few good ideas on where to go from here. Also, I'm sorry if my voice sounds even worse than usual. I'm still recovering from a cold. Other than that, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.